In a family courtroom, the judge doesn't hold the most power. The expert witness does. For Alex Hayes, a single dad fighting for his son, that expert was a complete stranger, until she wasn't. Weeks earlier, on a dead Tuesday, he'd fixed her jet ski for free. Now she held his future in her hands, and she remembered the grease on his fingers and the kindness in his eyes when nobody was watching. This is the story of Alex Hayes, a man running a failing marina repair shop who would give his last wrench to keep his 7-year-old son, Leo. And of Dr. Mara Vance, the court-appointed psychologist tasked with deciding if he's a fit father. Their paths weren't supposed to cross until the hearing, but fate and a broken impeller had other plans. What happens when the person judging your life remembers you at your most human, and that memory is the one thing they're legally obligated to forget? The fight for Leo began not in court, but 2 years earlier when his mother, Chloe, drove away from their coastal town and never looked back. She left a note, $500 on the counter, and a 7-year-old boy with a fear of abandonment that mirrored his father's. Alex Hayes was a boat mechanic by trade, a dreamer by nature. He'd sunk his inheritance into a dusty marina at the edge of town, a place called the Narrows. He envisioned a bustling hub. Reality was a rotting dock, 3 regular customers, and a mountain of debt. His world shrank to 2 things: keeping the lights on at the marina and being the rock for Leo. He packed lunches shaped like sharks. He helped with second-grade math. He became both mother and father in a life that felt perpetually on the brink of sinking. But stability in the eyes of the state requires more than love. It requires proof. When Chloe resurfaced 18 months later, sober, remarried to a real estate developer in the city, and petitioning for full custody, she didn't attack Alex's love. She attacked his foundation. Her lawyer's filings painted a devastating picture: irregular income, substandard housing in the marina's back office, a lack of structured extracurriculars for the child. They called it a nomadic and financially precarious environment. Alex called it home. The court, however, needed to see beyond emotion. It needed a dispassionate clinical evaluation of what was best for Leo. And so the system moved. A family court judge, the Honorable Paula Mendoza, ordered a full custody evaluation. She appointed an independent expert, a psychologist with a spotless reputation for neutrality, to dissect their lives. That expert was Dr. Mara Vance. Dr. Vance operated out of a serene, book-lined office 40 minutes inland. At 34, she was considered a rising star in forensic psychology. Her method was meticulous: multiple interviews with each parent, observation sessions with the child, home visits, and a deep dive into school records and financial statements. Her reports were legendary for their detail and their resistance to sway. She was a black box. You couldn't lobby her. You couldn't guess her conclusions. Her only allegiance was to the child's best interests, as defined by a complex matrix of psychological stability, safety, and opportunity. For Alex, she was the ultimate judge. He would never plead his case to her directly. He would only be observed, analyzed, and summarized in a report that would land on Judge Mendoza's desk with the force of a verdict. The pressure atomized Alex's already thin margins. The legal fees were a slow bleed. He took on any repair job, no matter how small or hopeless. He worked until his hands were raw, the smell of gasoline and salt water a permanent tattoo on his skin. Leo felt the tension. He started having nightmares about moving to a big, quiet house where he wouldn't know the rules. Alex's promise became a mantra: "We're not going anywhere, buddy. This is our dock." But the fear in his son's eyes was a reflection of his own. Then on a Tuesday in late September, the universe offered a moment of unscripted grace. It was the deadest part of the afternoon. Leo was at school. The marina was silent, the water a sheet of glass. Alex was half asleep over an engine manual when he heard the sputter and cough of an approaching jet ski. It wasn't the healthy roar of a joyrider. It was the death rattle of a failing engine. The craft limped into his dock, piloted by a woman with a look of profound frustration. She cut the engine, and silence flooded back in. She was in her 30s with copper hair escaping a practical ponytail, wearing a wetsuit pulled down to her waist. She looked capable but out of her depth with machinery. "I think it's seized," she said without preamble. "It just died out by the channel marker." Alex knew the model. It was a temperamental older model infamous for a specific finicky fuel line issue. He could already see the problem. "Impeller probably clogged with seaweed," he said, kneeling by the craft. "Drew in something that choked it. You're lucky it didn't overheat and warp the housing." She sighed, checking a sleek, expensive-looking watch. "How long to fix it? I need to get back." There was an urgency in her voice that had nothing to do with leisure. Alex peered at the jet ski's intake. He had the part. It was a 20-minute job, 30 if he was slow. He also had the invoice pad in his back pocket and the crushing weight of a bill from his lawyer due tomorrow. He thought of the number he should charge, $150 for the part, $80 for labor. $230 he desperately needed. But he looked at her, not at her watch or her tone, but at the genuine stress tightening her eyes. He saw someone having a genuinely bad day, stranded. He thought of the cold, transactional machinery of his own life, the court's evaluations, the dollar-per-hour value placed on his time with Leo. In that moment, he rebelled against all of it. "Tell you what," he said, wiping his hands on his already stained shorts. "It's a slow day. I've got the part right here. Let me just clear the intake. No charge." She blinked, stunned. "You're serious?" "Consider it karma for the bay," Alex said, offering a small, tired smile. "Don't want you stuck out here." For the next 25 minutes, he worked with quiet, efficient competence. He showed her the shredded seaweed that had choked the impeller, explaining how to avoid it next time. He refused her repeated offers to pay, finally accepting a bottle of water from her cooler as his only fee. When the engine roared back to life, a clean, healthy sound, her relief was palpable. "Thank you," she said, her earlier impatience gone, replaced by a warmth that reached her eyes. "You saved my day. Seriously, I'm Mara." "Alex," he replied, giving a little wave. "Safe ride back." He watched her jet ski carve a smooth line back toward the open water, a tiny figure against the vastness of the bay. He felt a flicker of something good, human. A connection untouched by petitions or evaluations. He had no idea that the woman named Mara was Dr. Mara Vance. He had no idea that in her professional calendar, blocked for the following week, was an entry that read, "Home observation, Hayes Residence, the Narrows Marina." He simply went back to his manual, $230 poorer in a material sense, but for a moment, feeling like a person again instead of a case file. The following Tuesday, Alex was scrambling. Dr. Vance's office had sent a formal notice. She would be conducting her home visit today at 4 p.m. Alex had spent the day in a frenzy of cleaning. He'd organized tools, swept the office floor 3 times, made sure Leo's little bunk area was tidy. He wanted to show stability, order. He was nervous, but he was also ready. He believed in the life he'd built. He believed any objective person could see the love here. At 3:45, he and Leo sat on the dock, waiting. Leo was swinging his legs, clutching his favorite toy tugboat. "What's she gonna ask me, Dad?" "Just be yourself, pal. She just wants to see how awesome you are." Alex's heart was a drum against his ribs. At 4 o'clock exactly, a sensible silver sedan pulled into the marina's gravel lot. The door opened. Alex stood up, putting a reassuring hand on Leo's shoulder. He watched as Dr. Mara Vance, court-appointed expert, stepped out of the car. She was dressed professionally now in a blouse and slacks, a leather portfolio in her hand. She looked toward the dock, her expert's gaze sweeping the premises, then landing on him. Their eyes met. A flicker of confusion passed over her face. Then recognition. Her professional mask didn't crack, but it shifted. Her eyes widened just for a fraction of a second. Her step faltered. She saw the grease-stained khakis, the faded tank top, the tired eyes. She saw the man from the dock, the man who fixed her jet ski for free, the man who was now her subject. Alex, in that suspended second, saw her recognition, and his entire world froze. The kind stranger from the bay was the expert witness. The person who held his future in her hands had seen him not as a struggling father under a microscope, but as a decent man on a slow Tuesday. He watched as she mastered her expression, as the neutral, analytical gaze returned. She walked toward them, her heels clicking on the old wood. "Mr. Hayes," she said, her voice carefully even. "I'm Dr. Vance." She extended her hand. Alex, his own hand trembling slightly, took it, the same hand that had passed her a wrench, the same hand she had shaken in gratitude a week before. The evaluation had begun, but the ground rules had just been shattered. She knew something about him that wasn't in any file, a piece of data that was, by every professional and legal standard, contaminated. And as she followed him into the Marina office for the interview, her pen poised over her notepad, one terrifying question hung in the salt-tinged air. Could a memory of kindness ever be truly erased? The interview that followed was a masterpiece of professional dissonance. Dr. Vance asked every required question, her voice a model of calibrated neutrality, but her eyes, trained to observe microexpressions, now held a secret. She was no longer evaluating a case file named Hayes. She was evaluating Alex, the man who'd shown her patience, the man who'd asked for nothing. She noted the clean but worn furniture, the small fridge stocked with simple food, the careful lines of Leo's drawings taped to the wall. She noted the financial statements showing a business barely breaking even. These were cold, hard facts for her report, but superimposed over them was the memory of him kneeling on the sun-bleached dock, his focus entirely on fixing her problem. She asked about his daily routine. As he spoke about getting Leo to school, working the marina, helping with homework, her mind inserted a scene. Him on that same dock, taking time for a stranger during what he'd called a slow day. An act of unobserved generosity. A data point that existed nowhere but in her memory, and one she was ethically and legally required to ignore. The cognitive friction was immense. Every positive thing she observed, his calm demeanor with Leo, his detailed knowledge of his son's teacher, his friends, his fears, was now filtered through a lens of prior goodwill. Was she seeing a truly engaged father, or was she seeing what she wanted to see because he'd been kind to her? The cornerstone of her profession, objectivity, had a hairline fracture. For Alex, the hour was pure psychological torture. He answered questions about his finances, his support network, his plans for Leo's education. Every answer felt inadequate under the weight of the official portfolio in her lap. But his mind screamed a silent counterargument. You know me. You saw me. That has to count for something. He wanted to reference it, to bridge the gap between the man on the dock and the father in this room. But his lawyer's warning echoed in his head. Do not, under any circumstances, try to influence the evaluator. Be factual. Be respectful. Do not plead your case. So he sat on his hands both literally and figuratively, while the person who held his future wrote notes about a version of him that felt incomplete. Session with Leo was worse. Mara was gentle, brilliant with children. She asked him about his friends, about school, about what he loved about living at the marina. Leo, initially shy, opened up about his toy boats, about helping his dad check the oil on the engines, about the heron that visited every morning. It's just me and Dad, Leo said matter-of-factly. But it's okay. He's always here. The statement was a double-edged sword. It spoke to stability of presence, but also to isolation. Alex watched Mara write that down, and he couldn't decipher her expression. When the home visit concluded, Mara packed her portfolio with a final, unreadable smile. Thank you for your time, Mr. Hayes. I'll be in touch with your attorney when the report is complete for review. The formality was a wall. Alex walked her to her car, the silence between them screaming with the unspoken. Just before she got in, she paused. She didn't look at him. She looked out at the bay, at the channel marker where her jet ski had died. It's still running perfectly, she said quietly, almost to herself. Then she got in the car and drove away. It was not a professional comment. It was a human one. And in that tiny crack, Alex felt a surge of wild, desperate hope. That hope curdled into dread 48 hours later. His attorney, a weary but kind man named Ben Carter, called. Alex, we have a problem. Chloe's lawyer has filed a motion. They've gotten wind of the home visit. They're not alleging anything specific yet, but the language is aggressive. They're demanding full transparency and hinting at potential undue influence. They're probing, Alex. Did you say anything to Dr. Vance? Did you try to talk to her outside the session? No, she was professional. We were professional. Alex's stomach dropped. The memory of Mara's parting comment about the jet ski now felt like a landmine. Okay, Ben sighed. Listen, this is chess, not checkers. They suspect any advantage. Your ex's new husband has deep pockets. They can afford to make noise to file motions that cost us money to fight. They want to paint you as unstable or worse, as trying to manipulate the process. We need to be cleaner than clean. You have no further contact with Dr. Vance unless I'm present. Understood. Meanwhile, in her office, Mara Vance was at war with herself. Her preliminary report draft was a mess of conflicted annotations. In the section on parental character and stability, her typed notes read, "Subject demonstrates consistent, child-focused routine. Emotional bond with child appears strong and secure. Financial instability remains a significant concern." But in the margin, her pen had written, "Subject demonstrates spontaneous prosocial behavior without expectation of reward. Evidence of intrinsic character strength not captured by financial metrics." That handwritten note was professional heresy. It was based on an extrajudicial source. With a grimace, she scratched it out until it was illegible. She reviewed the counterfile from Chloe's attorney. It was slick, full of affidavits from a child psychologist they'd hired, arguing that Leo's environment lacked cognitive stimulation and social opportunity. It highlighted the marina's remote location, the lack of other children, the unconventional living quarters. It was a portrait of deprivation, expertly drawn. Mara knew how to discount biased hired gun testimony, but the underlying facts, the isolation, the financial strain, were real. They were the facts she was supposed to weigh. But now, against those facts, her mind held the image of a calm, competent man fixing a machine for free. Which was the truer measure of a parent's capacity to provide a nurturing environment? The balance sheet, or the impulse to help a stranger? Her ethical dilemma had a name: anchoring bias. It's when an initial piece of information, often encountered early, disproportionately influences all subsequent judgments. The jet ski encounter was her anchor. She was acutely aware of it, which made it both easier and harder to manage. Awareness didn't erase the bias. It just made her second-guess every objective observation. Was she favoring Alex because of the anchor, or was she now overcorrecting and being unfairly harsh to compensate for it? There was no clear path. The tension exploded 2 weeks later at a pretrial conference in Judge Mendoza's chambers. The air was thick with legal hostility. Chloe, polished and confident in a designer suit, sat beside her barracuda of a lawyer. Alex, in his one good shirt, sat beside Ben. Mara Vance was present, a neutral island in a sea of contention. Chloe's lawyer, a woman named Diane Frost, began with practiced concern. "Your Honor, we're increasingly troubled by the evaluation timeline and potential for contextual contamination. We've received information suggesting the evaluator, Dr. Vance, may have had prior, undisclosed contact with the respondent. This creates an appearance of impropriety that could fatally taint the process." Alex felt the blood drain from his face. Ben stood up. "Objection, Your Honor. This is a fishing expedition. Counsel is implying impropriety without a shred of evidence, attempting to discredit a court-appointed expert because they don't like the direction of the wind." Judge Mendoza, a woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing, held up a hand. She turned to Mara. "Dr. Vance, these are serious implications. Is there any truth to the suggestion of prior contact?" Every person in the room turned to her. This was the moment. The professional, ethical, and legal breach sat in her throat. Denial was the safe, expected answer. The encounter was irrelevant. It was personal. To disclose it was to invite chaos, to potentially implode the evaluation and have herself removed from the case. Alex stared at her, his expression a silent plea she couldn't possibly interpret. Mara took a slow breath. Her career was built on truth, even inconvenient truth. "Your Honor," she said, her voice clear. "Prior to my formal appointment in this matter, I had a single, incidental encounter with Mr. Hayes. My personal watercraft malfunctioned near his marina. He provided roadside, or rather dockside, assistance. The interaction lasted approximately 25 minutes. It was a commercial transaction at a public business. She carefully omitted the words "for free." A stunned silence filled the room. Diane Frost pounced, her voice rising with theatrical outrage. "A prior relationship. Your Honor, this is exactly the kind of ex parte contact that undermines the entire foundation of neutral evaluation. How can we possibly trust?" "It wasn't a relationship," Mara interjected, her own voice gaining steel. "It was a mechanic fixing a customer's jet ski. I was a customer. He was the proprietor. I had no knowledge he was involved in any litigation, and he had no knowledge of my profession. To characterize it as anything more is factually incorrect." But the damage was done. The seed of doubt was planted, fertilized by legal strategy. Judge Mendoza's face was unreadable. "Dr. Vance, did this encounter influence your assessment in any way?" "I am aware of the potential for cognitive bias, Your Honor. I have taken and continue to take rigorous steps within my methodology to ensure my evaluation is based solely on the data gathered during the formal assessment process." It was a perfect, professional answer. It was also, in her heart, a lie of omission. The encounter hadn't influenced her assessment. It had asterisk haunted it. The judge steepled her fingers. "The court appreciates your disclosure. However, given the appearance of a conflict, however incidental, I am inclined to grant the motion. The current evaluation report is hereby stricken from consideration." Alex's world shattered. Ben put a hand on his arm to steady him. Judge Mendoza continued, "But we are not starting from zero. The time invested in this child's life cannot be wasted. Dr. Vance, you are to immediately partner with a co-evaluator, a Dr. Simon Gable, whom the court will appoint. You will reconduct the evaluation jointly. All findings, all observations will be documented and signed by both of you. This creates a system of checks and balances. Final report is due in 30 days. We are adjourned." As the room emptied, Alex was left reeling. The one person who'd seen his humanity had been officially neutered. Her opinion now meant nothing unless it was corroborated by a stranger. Mara gathered her things, avoiding his gaze. As she passed him, she stopped. For a second, the professional mask vanished, replaced by something raw and apologetic. "I'm sorry, Alex," she whispered, so only he could hear. "The system, it doesn't have a category for what you did." Then she was gone, leaving him with the cold comfort that she remembered, and the colder reality that in the eyes of the law, that memory was now a mark against him. Dr. Simon Gable did not believe in ghosts or in kindness as data. He believed in metrics, in peer-reviewed scales, and in the incontrovertible truth of a bank statement. His reputation was built on a particular kind of ruthlessness. He called it empirical clarity. To Alex Hayes, he was simply the executioner. From their first joint session, Gable's approach was a study in contrast to Mara's. Where she observed, he interrogated. He focused laser-like on Alex's failures, the marina's debt, the months without health insurance for Leo, the unorthodox homeschooling that happened when Alex couldn't afford after-school care. "Love doesn't pay for dental work, Mr. Hayes," Gable said, not unkindly, but with the finality of a judge pronouncing a sentence. Mara was trapped in a gilded cage. Her role was now to observe, concur, or dissent. Every note she took was subject to Gable's review. She watched as he reframed the narrative. The small, loving moments she had noted were minimized. The financial instability was magnified. The marina wasn't a home. It was a failing business masquerading as one. Alex's patience with Leo was recast as a lack of ambition, a passive acceptance of their circumstances. Gable was building a report, brick by clinical brick, that led to one inevitable conclusion. Leo's best interests lay in the structured, affluent, two-parent home his mother could provide. The pressure fractured Alex's resilience. The dual evaluation meant more interviews, more lost work hours, more legal fees. The marina's decay accelerated. A regular customer, seeing the closed for family emergency sign too often, took his boat elsewhere. The final blow came when the bank called about a missed loan payment. It wasn't a large sum, but it was the trigger. They were initiating foreclosure proceedings on the marina property. The Narrows, the only home Leo had ever known, the entire foundation of Alex's argument for stability, was being pulled out from under him. When Ben Carter relayed the news, Alex sat on the dock in the dark, the weight of it all finally crushing him. He had fought with love, with hard work, with integrity. And the system, in the form of Simon Gable and a bank manager, was proving those currencies worthless. Chloe's side, sensing blood in the water, moved for the kill. Diane Frost filed a new motion attaching the bank's foreclosure notice. The language was devastating. The respondent's primary argument for stability, the child's home environment, is now demonstrably evaporating. This is not in the child's best interests. It is a textbook case of environmental collapse. The motion requested an emergency hearing to modify temporary custody, asking that Leo be placed with his mother immediately, pending the final evaluation, to avoid further disruption. Alex was facing the unthinkable, losing Leo before the final report was even written. Panic turned to desperation. In a moment of blind instinct, he did the one thing he'd been told never to do. He drove to Mara Vance's office after hours. He didn't plan to beg. He just needed someone, anyone who'd seen a sliver of his real life, to understand what was happening. He found her just leaving, locking her office door. Her face, when she saw him, wasn't angry. It was pale with dread. "Alex, you can't be here. This is exactly what they'll use against you." "I know," he said, his voice ragged. They're taking the marina, the bank. They're using it to say I can't provide stability. But that marina is asterisk our stability, it's everything. Leo loves it there. He's happy there. Doesn't that count? Doesn't happiness count for anything?" He was on the precipice of tears, a man watching his entire world be itemized and sold off. Mara looked around the empty hallway, her professional ethics screaming at her to walk away. But the man in front of her was the same one from the dock, now fractured. "Alex," she said, her voice low and urgent, "listen to me. Gable's report is almost finished. It's going to recommend your ex get primary custody. He sees the foreclosure as the ultimate proof of instability. My dissent won't be enough. It'll just look like I'm biased because of the jet ski." She was confessing, violating every rule, but the human cost was too high. The hearing isn't about love. It's about risk mitigation. You have to give the judge a reason to see the risk in moving Leo, not just the risk in keeping him with you. "How?" Alex whispered, hopeless. "I don't know," Mara admitted. "But it can't be me who helps you find it. You have to talk to Ben. You have to find a way to show that ripping Leo out of his home, even an imperfect one, is more damaging than the financial uncertainty." She reached out, almost touching his arm, then pulled her hand back. "Now please go, and never come here again." Alex left, carrying a new kind of torment. She had confirmed his worst fears and given him a cryptic, impossible task. Show the risk of change. But how do you prove the trauma of a future that hasn't happened? The emergency hearing was a week later. The atmosphere was funereal. Judge Mendoza heard Diane Frost present the foreclosure as a fait accompli, an act of God that settled the matter. Ben Carter argued valiantly about roots, about community, about the psychological harm of sudden displacement. But he was arguing with concepts against the hard, cold fact of a bank's legal filing. It was then that Simon Gable asked to address the court. He hadn't even finished his final report, but he felt the emergency warranted a preliminary opinion. He took the stand, a pillar of academic certainty. He spoke of secure attachments being dependent on secure environments. He stated that a child could not be expected to thrive in a sinking ship, both literally and metaphorically. He acknowledged Dr. Vance's differing perspective, but attributed it to anomalous data interpretation. He ended with a devastating, seemingly reasonable recommendation. Given the imminent loss of the primary residence, a transition to the mother's stable home should begin immediately. To to provide the child with a predictable foundation during this turbulent time. A gradual, therapeutic transition can mitigate any attachment disruption. It was over. Alex closed his eyes, feeling the gavel fall in his soul. Judge Mendoza nodded, seemingly convinced. She was about to speak when a small, clear voice piped up from the back of the courtroom. He fixed her boat. All heads turned. Leo Hayes, who had been drawing quietly in the back with a court attendant, was standing up, pointing a finger at Dr. Gable, then at Mara. His face was scrunched in fierce confusion. "My dad fixed the lady's boat when it was broken, for free. That's a good thing. Why doesn't that count?" The room froze. The attendant tried to gently shush Leo, but he pulled away, his focus on the judge. "He helps people. He helps me. Our doc is the best place. The Heron knows my name." It was a child's testimony, raw and unfiltered by any protocol. It was also the one piece of evidence that had been systematically excluded from the entire process: the testimony of the child's lived, loved experience and the simple, undeniable fact of his father's character. Judge Mendoza stared at Leo for a long moment. She looked at Alex, who was staring at his son with a mix of awe and heartbreak. She looked at Mara Vance, who had gone very still. She looked at Simon Gable, whose expression was one of mild, professional annoyance at the interruption. She looked at Chloe, who was glaring at her son. The judge cleared her throat. "The court thanks the young man for his perspective," she said, her voice softer than before. "However, a child's preferences are but one factor." She turned back to the adults. "The motion for emergency modification is held in abeyance, pending the completion of the final joint evaluation report, which will be delivered to this court in 1 week. Temporary custody arrangements shall remain unchanged." It wasn't a victory. It was a stay of execution, but it was something. Leo's outburst had, for a fleeting second, forced the room to see the human reality behind the files. As they left the courtroom, Mara caught up to Alex in the hallway. Leo was clinging to his father's leg. Mara knelt down to Leo's level. "That was very brave, Leo," she said. "You love your dad a lot, don't you?" Leo nodded, burying his face in Alex's jeans. Mara stood up, meeting Alex's eyes. In hers, he saw the conflict had finally crystallized into a decision. 1 week, Alex," she said, her voice barely audible. "The report is written, but it's not signed." She turned and walked away, leaving him with a terrifying, electrifying sliver of hope. The battle was lost on paper, but the war for his son was now in the hands of the one person who knew the whole, impossible truth. The final hearing was in 7 days. And Dr. Mara Vance had just chosen a side. The week that followed was the longest of Alex Hayes' life. The unsigned report was a phantom limb, its contents known only to Mara and Simon. He didn't know if her choice meant hope or a more profound kind of professional suicide. All he could do was wait and hold on to his son. He took Leo fishing off the dock, the same dock that was no longer theirs in any legal sense. They didn't talk about the hearing. They talked about the Heron, about the way the water changed color in the afternoon. Alex memorized the shape of his son's joy against the dying light of his dream. In her office, Mara Vance prepared for professional oblivion. She had done the unthinkable. She had written a formal, 40-page dissenting addendum to the joint evaluation, refusing to sign the main document. Her dissent didn't mention a jet ski. It meticulously deconstructed Simon Gable's conclusions. It argued that his risk assessment was one-sided, focusing solely on material risk while ignoring profound psychological and attachment-based risks. She cited child development studies on the trauma of sudden environmental displacement. She used Gable's own metrics to show that Leo's attachment to his father scored in the highest percentile of security, a factor she argued was more predictive of long-term well-being than parental income. It was a brilliant, bulletproof piece of professional dissent. And it was a declaration of war on her co-evaluator and on the tidy, financial logic that often decided these cases. The final custody hearing was held on a rainy Thursday morning. The courtroom felt smaller, heavier. Alex sat with Ben. Chloe sat with Diane Frost and her husband, a man who looked politely bored by the whole affair. Simon Gable sat with an air of academic certainty. Mara Vance sat alone, a stack of papers before her. Judge Mendoza began without ceremony. The court has received the Joint Evaluation Report, along with a substantial addendum from Dr. Vance indicating a fundamental disagreement with the primary findings. Dr. Gable, you may summarize your recommendations. Gable was succinct, confident. He outlined the financial instability, the foreclosure, the lack of extended family support. He concluded that the mother's home offered superior educational resources, social opportunities, and long-term security. He recommended primary physical custody to Chloe with generous visitation for Alex. It was logical. It was clean. It sounded inevitable. Then it was Mara's turn. Dr. Vance, the judge said, her tone neutral, your dissent is uncommon in its scope. Please explain your position to the court. Mara stood. She didn't look at Alex. She addressed the judge as a scientist, a peer. Your Honor, my disagreement is not with the facts. The financial data is accurate. The marina is failing. My disagreement is with the weight assigned to those facts versus other, more significant data. The child in this case, Leo, is not merely adjusting to his environment. He is thriving within a specific, secure attachment to his father. Uprooting him from that primary attachment, from his entire known world, his home, his routines, his symbolic harem, to place him in a materially richer but emotionally unfamiliar environment, constitutes a severe and unnecessary psychological risk. We are not comparing two stable homes. We are comparing one child's deeply rooted, secure world against a hypothetical upgrade in square footage and school district. The research is clear on which is more damaging to a 7-year-old. Simon Gable scoffed audibly. With respect, my colleague is engaging in sentimentality. A secure attachment cannot exist in an environment of tangible collapse. The foreclosure is not hypothetical. It is happening. The relationship is not collapsing, Mara fired back, her voice sharpening. It is the strongest thing in that child's life. Our job is to evaluate parental capacity, not real estate portfolios. Mr. Hayes has demonstrated exceptional capacity to provide emotional stability, nurturance, and love under significant duress. That is a better predictor of future success than a bank balance. The legal teams erupted. Diane Frost accused Mara of bias, of letting a chance encounter color her judgment. Ben Carter defended her integrity, arguing her dissent was rooted in science, not sentiment. The judge let the arguments volley, her face impassive. Finally, she raised her hand for silence. She looked at the two experts. The court is faced with two diametrically opposed professional opinions, one based on empirical material reality, the other on psychological and attachment theory. This is the heart of family law. She then did something unexpected. She turned to Alex. Mr. Hayes, the foreclosure proceedings. Is there any realistic path to keeping your home? Alex, stunned to be addressed directly, stood. His mouth was dry. Your Honor, I've applied for a loan modification. I've found a potential business partner, another mechanic who wants to invest. It's not guaranteed, but I'm fighting for it. It's all I have. The judge nodded. She then turned to Chloe. Ms. Reynolds, if you were awarded primary custody, what is your plan regarding your son's relationship with his father? Chloe, prepared, answered smoothly. We would, of course, support a generous visitation schedule. Weekends, holidays. We want Alex in Leo's life. But you would move him 40 miles away to the city, the judge stated, not asked. To provide him with the opportunities he deserves, yes. Judge Mendoza sat back. She was silent for a full minute, the only sound the rain against the courtroom windows. Then she began to speak. This is a difficult case. Both parents love this child, but the law requires me to decide his best interests. Dr. Gable's report is technically correct. It is also incomplete. It catalogs what is lacking, but it fails to adequately measure what is present. Dr. Vance's report attempts to measure the immeasurable, the strength of a bond. Leo's intervention last week, while not determinative, was illustrative. He is not a passive subject in this. He is a person, rooted in a place and a relationship he fiercely values. She took a breath, and Alex felt his heart stop. The foreclosure is a serious material concern. However, terminating primary custody based on a financial event that has not yet concluded, and which the father is actively contesting, would be premature and profoundly disruptive. Therefore, the court finds that it is in the best interests of the child, Leo Hayes, to remain in the primary physical custody of his father, Alexander Hayes. Alex gasped, his legs buckling. Ben grabbed his arm. The judge continued over the murmurs. But this is not without conditions. The court orders the following. First, Mr. Hayes shall enroll in and complete a financial management course within 6 months. Second, he shall provide the court with an updated plan for the marina's viability or alternative stable housing within 90 days. Third, the mother shall have expanded, structured visitation, including 2 weekends per month and significant holiday time. This order is subject to review in 1 year. The bond between father and son is preserved. The material concerns are addressed with oversight. That is the order of this court. It was a Solomonic ruling, but one that leaned decisively toward Alex. He had won, not on paper but in the heart of the law. Chloe was furious, but her lawyer was already whispering about appeals. Simon Gable gathered his things with a stiff, disapproving air. Mara Vance simply sat, exhaling a breath she seemed to have held for weeks. Outside the courtroom, in the marble hallway, the world had changed. Leo hugged his father so tightly he could barely breathe. Ben was already talking about next steps, about the loan modification paperwork. Alex heard none of it. He saw Mara Vance walking alone toward the elevators. He gently disentangled from Leo and caught up to her. "Dr. Vance." She turned. She looked exhausted, but there was a peace in her eyes he hadn't seen before. "It's Mara," she said. "Mara, thank you. You saved us." She shook her head. "No, you saved yourselves. I just refused to ignore what I saw. My report, it might have consequences for me. Gable won't forget this." She gave a small, wry smile. "It was worth it." Alex, overcome, did something impulsive. He took her hand, the one she'd shaken on the dock a lifetime ago. "If you ever need your jet ski fixed," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you know where to find me. Lifetime warranty." She laughed, a real, genuine sound. "I'll hold you to that." The elevator doors opened. She stepped inside, gave him one final nod, and was gone. The story doesn't end with a fairy tale. The marina didn't suddenly become profitable. Alex's loan modification was approved, but it was a grind. The business partner invested, and the Narrows became a smaller, humbler, but sustainable operation. Leo stayed in his local school. He still missed his mom on her weekends, but he came home to his dock, to his heron, to his dad. Chloe appealed. The appellate court upheld Judge Mendoza's ruling, citing its balanced approach. The oversight conditions were eventually lifted after Alex completed his courses and showed a year of stable income. He never got rich, but he got to keep his son. And what of Mara Vance? The professional fallout was real. Simon Gable blackballed her with certain family court judges, but her courageous dissent became a quiet legend among other psychologists who believed the system had become too focused on metrics. She lost some clients. She gained others who specifically wanted an evaluator who looked beyond the balance sheet. She never saw Alex Hayes again professionally. But one Saturday morning the next summer, she did take her jet ski out to the channel near the Narrows. She didn't stop. She just waved at the figure on the dock, who waved back. A silent acknowledgement that sometimes the most powerful data never makes it into the report. It just changes everything. So what is the true measure of a parent, of a person? This story forces us to ask if our systems, designed to be fair, sometimes become blind to the very qualities they claim to cherish. Integrity, kindness, the quiet consistency of love. Alex Hayes was measured by his debt, his address, his tax returns. Those were the numbers on the page, but his son measured him by his presence. A stranger measured him by his character in an unobserved moment. And in the end, that measurement, though it nearly broke the machine, was the one that mattered most. We build lives of spreadsheets and benchmarks, but we live them in moments of unrecorded grace. The 20 minutes Alex spent fixing a jet ski for free didn't win him custody, but it created a witness. It planted a seed of undeniable truth in the mind of someone who held power over his future. It proved that who we are when nobody is watching is often who we truly are. The Narrows Marina still stands. It's smaller, quieter. Leo is growing up there, his childhood measured in tides and sunsets, not square footage. He sees his mother often. He has two homes but one anchor. And Dr. Mara Vance continues her work, perhaps with a sharper eye for the data that never gets filed, for the humanity that exists between the lines of a financial statement. This is more than a story about a lucky break. It's a reminder that in a world obsessed with quantifiable outcomes, the most powerful forces are often the unquantifiable ones. The currency of character is still the most valuable, and sometimes, just sometimes, it finds its way into the ledger. What about you? Have you ever been judged solely on your resume, your bank account, your zip code, while the core of who you are was ignored? Or have you been the one to see past the surface of someone the world had dismissed? Share your story in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story of quiet courage and unexpected connection resonated with you, please give this video a like. It truly helps the channel. Share it with a friend who might need a reminder that good people and good fathers are everywhere, often in the places we least expect. And for more documentaries that explore the profound moments in ordinary lives, subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a story. Thanks for watching. Remember, the most important moments often happen off the record, and the most valuable things we have are rarely the things we can buy.